So Stan Van is the new coach of the Pelicans, and the obvious thing you think of is how he put shooters around Dwight a million years ago, and he could do the same thing for Zion. I also think we're going to see some Zion at center. However, the rest of the NBA has caught up to that strategy, and so I don't think it's a slam dunk that Stan Van will just be amazing for the Pelicans. I do think Stan Van's good, but I do think his time with the Pistons should be looked at a bit. I mean, there's a few things you could say. You could say the roster wasn't that good. I mean, the starting five of the Pistons in 2016 when they won 44 games under Stan Van, it was Reggie Jackson, KCP, Marcus Morris, Tobias Harris, and Andre Drummond. Not exactly amazing, but they won 44 games, so for what that's worth. We should remember Stan Van also had Drummond doing more as a playmaker towards the tail end of his time with the Pistons. Unfortunately, it was ruined when they traded for Blake, and I think we would all agree Stan Van was not a good front office guy for the Pistons, but now he's just going to be coaching the Pelicans, so we don't have to talk about that too much. I don't know. I think there are good and bad things to take away from Stan Van's time with the Pistons. For one, they were a good defensive team with him pretty much the whole time. If we think about with this Pelicans team, I mean, of course, I mentioned in the beginning the spacing around Zion. Well, if they were going to do that, then they'd have to drop Derek Favors. They would have to get a shooting big guy. And the Pelicans don't have too many resources to do that. I mean, the obvious one is Ibaka, but after they max Ingram, there's not going to be too much money left for a guy like that, except for some exceptions. Aaron Baines can shoot, but I don't know if he can stay healthy like that. So we'll see how they open up the floor for Zion, and that's just what I assume they're going to do. Because Stan Van did it the same way he did it in Orlando, he did it in Detroit around Drummond. The pieces just weren't as good. Another thing to be said is while Stan Van ran a million pick and rolls with the Pistons back in 2016, he was also posting up a good amount. Drummond averaged 5 post-ups a game in 2016. Now obviously since then the league has changed quite a bit, but does that mean we're going to see a bunch of Zion post-ups? Potentially. I mean, they threw the ball to Dwight a good amount of times in the post as well, so we'll have to see what Stan Van wants to do there. I also think some of the things we saw with Drummond, where Stan Van had him playmaking a little bit more from the elbow before they traded for Blake, I think we could see very similar things with Zion. And then you get the cutters going to the basket, you get some of the handoff plays, kind of like what Miami does. I mean, I would imagine if Zion's healthy, we could see Zion, JJ Redick handoff plays next season for these guys. Obviously, Zion needs to be healthy, he needs to be in shape, all that good stuff. Let's talk about the rest of the roster. So how is Stan Van going to use Brandon Ingram? Well, the closest thing I can think of to Stan Van having a guy like Ingram is Turkoglu, who, for some reason, just had these 2 seasons for the Magic where it's like, wait a minute, this guy's suddenly a point guard. I feel like Stan Van is going to dare Ingram to be a little bit more of a playmaker. This last year, he had a 19% assist percentage, 13% turnover percentage. It's not bad. I mean, he did have 3 turnovers a game, but he also handled the ball so much, so I'm not as freaked out by that actual number. Ingram had 5 pick and rolls a game as the ball handler this previous season. I wouldn't be shocked if that went up a little bit under Stan Van. Could we see some Ingram-Zion pick and roll? I think you're going to have to. I mean, if Zion and Ingram are supposed to be the 2 primary scorers of this team, you need to be able to use them to help the other guy. And Zion only had 2 pick and rolls a game last year. Now, I'm sure teams would want to switch that, but I do think through Zion handoff plays, through plays where there's multiple screeners, like a Spain pick and roll, that sort of thing, I feel like you can have success with the Zion-Ingram 2-man game. As far as Drew is concerned, I mean, I guess a lot of the things I said about Ingram and Zion, I could say about Drew as well. I really do think Stan Van is just going to make Zion the heart of the offense, where he's screening for someone, or it's a handoff play, or it's a Zion post-up, basically every possession. But I also think we're going to see times where Zion is bringing the ball up floor. I feel like if you kind of pigeonholed Zion into this big guy, but 6'8", or however tall he is, role, I do think that would be wasting a little bit of his talent, so I figure you start getting him going on that stuff now. high screens every now and then. Not all the time. I don't think he's ready for it like that, but yeah. I mentioned Drew. I mean, I figure Zion sets screens for Drew. I figure the handoff stuff you run with JJ through Zion, you can run that with Drew as the guy instead of JJ as well. A little more potential of him going to the basket. And then, Zion can cut off of that, and then it can be a Drew to Zion lob sort of thing. I know that I occasionally have said, well, what if a team like the Nuggets traded for Drew, but I don't think the Pelicans should trade Drew. So, just establish that again. And then, of course, while all this is happening, I think this team is going to be attempting a whole bunch of threes. That's the other part of this. Although it should be said, under Stan Van, the Pistons were not shooting way more threes than everybody else, the way his Magic were. So, for whatever that's worth. And as for Lonzo, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I feel like Stan Van had a moment where he talked about Lonzo on TV, where he said in the half court he thinks Lonzo is best as an off-ball player, especially if his threes are still going to be good, which they were throughout the regular season, maybe not so much in the bubble. Adjusted his form, all that stuff. And then in the full court, he can be more of a ball handler. So I feel like we're just going to see that. I mean, I don't think we're going to see much Lonzo-Zion pick and roll unless Zion or Lonzo makes some real improvements to his pull-up game. I feel like Lonzo, the best way to get him going in the half court is to do some of that handoff play stuff, because you got to help him get the defender off of him. He's not a good enough ball handler, shot creator, whatever you want to say, to get by defenders consistently. So that's what I would say. I think Zion, why do I keep saying Zion instead of Lonzo? Lonzo's ideal stat line to me is like 13, 14 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, playing well on defense, and improving his percentages. So we'll see if he can do it. Now we should talk about defense. So looking at the 2016 Pistons, a team that was 12th or 13th in defense, but you could say it didn't really have the personnel to suggest they would be that good defensively. I think the main thing was they didn't foul, they didn't turn the ball over too much. They were like 8th in turnovers, with first being like the least amount. And they were also 2nd in defensive rebound percentage. So they just kind of didn't beat themselves. And they did an even better job of that in the 2017 season, where they finished below 500, but they were the 8th best defensive team in the league. They were 1st or 2nd among turnovers, defensive rebound percentage, not fouling, all that stuff. So that, to me, it just seems Stan Van really establishes the fundamentals of defense. And if you do that stuff well, it can be a scenario in which you look at the roster and you're like, oh, they won't be that good defensively, and then they end up being very good defensively. So we'll see if that can apply to this Pelicans team. I mean, Zion, he's got to make progress defensively. I think losing some weight will help him there. If they keep Favors, that could help, although Favors wasn't very good in the bubble. It was really weird. He was awesome regular season, and then bubble comes around. It's like, what? Ingram has the size to be a good defender. Lonzo has been a good defender at times. Drew is, of course, very good. I think there's a solid amount of switch potential, at least between Ingram, Drew, and Lonzo. I mean, Drew is the shortest one there, but he can defend guys bigger than him. Can Zion switch like that? I don't know. I mean, going into the NBA, I thought Zion could be a more athletic Draymond, because I figured he could just change directions and his lateral quickness would be awesome. And that hasn't been the case so far in the NBA. Granted, his NBA sample size has been very small, but he's going to have to prove some things on that side of the floor. So that's that, man. Do I have anything else for some of the other dudes on this team? Do I think Jackson Hayes is going to have some resurgence or whatever under Stan Van? I don't know. I mean, he did average 7 points in not too many minutes a game. He didn't foul as much as you might think for a rookie big guy. So that's cool. I just don't know if he's going to be good on defense, but there you go. Stan Van, defensive coach. I should have definitely mentioned Josh Hart by now. That's a mistake on my part. I think with Josh, there's still some questions. His three has not been as good as you'd like it to be. His off-the-dribble game has not been too good. His turnovers almost match his assists. But even so, I think Josh Hart can be a nice 15 points a game guy. And he's 6'5", he's a good defender. I think he can play either wing spot. So we'll see. He's not going to be competing with each one more for minutes. I assume they're going to let him walk. And they probably are going to decline Darius Miller's $7 million as well. So maybe that frees things up for Josh Hart quite a bit. And perhaps he could be a bit of a glue guy offensively for Stan Van, where sometimes he's a three-point shooter, sometimes he's a bit more of a ball handler, and then hopefully defensively he's good. As far as Nickeil Alexander-Walker, I don't know. I don't think I have as much of a gauge on him. I mean, he only played 12 minutes a game, and he played 47 games. I don't know much about him. The only thing I remember is he was chucking a bunch of shots in his first game, and Chris Webber, for some reason, really liked him, even if they were all bricks. So that's that, man. Stan Van to the Pelicans. Do I think this will be an improvement over Alvin Gentry? I don't know, because I still think it's down to Zion and his health, and if he's in shape and all that, so I don't know. There's your non-answer.